All right. Thank you very much, Bill. Let's do this. Okay, a couple quick updates. I promised a really big update, so I'm about to get there. First, this isn't the big one, but first, we've sent nearly 20,000 emails now to senators urging them to reject Neera Tanden, which is awesome. So many other groups didn't want to touch that issue with a 100-foot pole, but I'm glad we did, and we've made an impact, and they are hearing us. And so that's really exciting. Second thing is we are really supportive of Gary Chambers. He's running for Congress in Louisiana. I believe it's the 1st district. And I'm encouraging you all to check him out. It's chambersforcongress.com. He went viral last year. He got up to speak at a city council meeting, and he yelled at Connie because she was doing online shopping when he was trying to tell her why Black Lives Matter. And it was just a really amazing moment. He's running for Congress now. He's a real progressive. So check him out at chambersforcongress.com. And now the big news is that next week on this call, we will be joined by Nina Turner. And we will be talking about raising the minimum wage and the fight for 15. Tina, I love those thumbs up. Yes. So we're really excited about that. Roots Action has been a supporter of Nina Turner for a really long time. So we're grateful that she's going to be joining us, and we're going to be pushing the fight for 15, raising the minimum wage. Hopefully we can get that in through reconciliation or some other way, but we know we have to get it done. Lastly, if you're not an official volunteer for the No Honeymoon campaign, check us out at nohoneymoon.org. Ask your friends to join. We need to keep growing this. It is so important. And now, on to Thomas Gokey. Thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated. I'm gonna give you a quick intro real quick, and then we can get going. So Thomas Gokey is a visual artist, an adjunct professor at Syracuse University, and an activist. He is an organizer and co-founder at the Debt Collective, which is a debtors union fighting to cancel debt. Welcome, Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us. We are glad you're here. I guess tell us a little bit about what you're doing. I know you brought a video to show us, but yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me, Ryan. And so yeah, the Debt Collective is trying to create a new kind of union, right? That in this age of financialization, we want to organize debtors around their creditors to collectively refuse and renegotiate basically our social relations, right? A debt at its most fundamental level is a social relation. And what's really exciting to me about debtor organizing is that it is a way that we have an enormous amount of power outside of the electoral system. Right? We can't ignore electoral politics, but we also know that it has severe limitations. We organize about all forms of household debt, not just student debt, but we're in a very special moment with student debt right now. So I'm going to post the link to the Debt Collective, and I encourage you to consider joining as a member. And our current campaign is the Biden Jubilee 100. So as a lot of you probably saw, earlier this week, Joe Biden made some comments about canceling student debt, basically saying he wasn't going to do it. We have been here before. We had to fight tooth and nail against the Obama Department of Education, who really did not want to cancel student debt, even for students who attended predatory for-profit universities that were breaking the law and putting people in hundreds of thousands of dollars of fraudulent student loans. They were trying to enforce those fraudulent loans. And we had to fight them and drag them kicking and screaming every step along the way towards debt cancellation. But we made significant progress. And we did that in part by organizing students to go on a student debt strike, to simply refuse to pay. To date, we've run over $1 billion worth of debt cancellation that stemmed from what started as a very small strike. We didn't have a large number of people. This was 15 people initially taking a moral stand. So for the first 100 days of the Biden administration, we have 100 strikers. And again, we're linking it to this legal mechanism to cancel student debt. But our theory of change has never been that we need a politician to do the right thing out of the goodness of their heart, right? Our theory of change has always been that no debt is going to get canceled unless we organize for it. We will only win what we organize. And we can win full cancellation if we organize enough people. We will simply be so powerful that it doesn't matter what Joe Biden wants. He's going to have to do what we want. We even won debt cancellation under Betsy DeVos. And on the paperwork where she signed to cancel the debt, she wrote, "with extreme displeasure." That was so satisfying. That was so delicious. It's going to break Joe Biden's heart to cancel student debt. And that's part of what is going to make it such a delicious victory when it comes. But nothing is inevitable, right? We will only win if we organize. I'm going to post a link to a Google Doc. This has a schedule of organizing calls that the Debt Collective is organizing specifically around this student debt cancellation campaign. You can see we've already had a heavy slate of meetings earlier today and throughout the next couple months. So if you're interested, it's an ever-evolving landscape, an ever-evolving strategy of how do we escalate, how do we maximize the pressure, how do we respond to the latest developments like what happened earlier this week. So I encourage you to join and help us figure this out as we go. And I do want to highlight one meeting that we are also excited about. This Saturday, we have a meeting with Nina Turner about student debt cancellation, where she's going to be meeting with a number of the strikers. So what has worked for us in the past isn't just a people's movement, direct action campaign, but also paired to a legal mechanism to actually do what we want to do. And Joe Biden, no matter what he says about it, he and the Secretary of Education have the legal authority to cancel any amount of federal student loans that they decide to cancel, including all of it, all of it. This $50,000 number that's being thrown around, that's being advocated by Senators Schumer and Warren and some other people, that is just an arbitrary number. He can cancel all of it. He should cancel all of it. Nobody should be forced to mortgage their future for a basic need like education. And I'm not a lawyer myself, so I'd like to play just a brief, like 3.5-minute video. I'm going to share my screen. And let me know if you can hear this.
I'm going to talk about one simple question. Is it legal for President Biden to cancel student debt? The answer is yes. He can do it today without any other action by Congress. Let me explain why. Imagine you lend me $20. It's your $20. You can ask me to pay it back in full, in half, or not at all. Student debt cancellation works the same way. When someone takes out a federal student loan, they're borrowing money from the government, and the Constitution gives Congress the authority to control property of the government, such as debts owed to it. When Congress gave the Secretary of Education the authority to make or back student loans, it also gave the Secretary the broad and unrestricted power to cancel or write down that debt. This power was established under the Higher Education Act in 1965. That law gives the Secretary of Education the authority to compromise, waive, or release any right, title, claim, lien, or demand, however acquired. The Secretary also has the authority not simply to compromise debt, but to modify a student loan to zero. Secretary Betsy DeVos actually used this authority to cancel out a limited amount of student debt. Now, it's important to understand the purpose of the Higher Education Act. It was to make the benefits of higher education widely available, especially to those who otherwise couldn't afford it. Nobody else but the federal government was willing to lend to people with no credit history, no means, and only the chance at a bright future. But we decided to do it because education is so important to us as individuals and as a country. But the intent was not what we're seeing now. Worsening the racial wealth gap, driving up costs, reducing affordability and access, and triggering a repayment crisis. The nation today has a $1.7 trillion student debt burden, owed to the federal government by about 43 million Americans. At the Project on Predatory Student Lending, we represent over 1 million student borrowers who were cheated by for-profit colleges. And this is an industry that aggressively targets and scams people who are looking for jobs and careers in order to get its hands on federal student loan dollars. And their priority is enrollment, not education. We see how defaulting on student debt can cause poor credit, food insecurity, homelessness, inability to pay household debt, barriers to employment, and mental and physical health issues. It holds people back in their decisions to get married and have children, or to do certain kinds of jobs that we as a country need doing. And this burden impacts the whole family, the whole community, the whole economy, not just the loan bearer. But we've also seen how debt cancellation can liberate Americans and their families. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, the government has paused federal student loan payments through September 2021. This has freed up households in this pandemic to spend money and help keep our economy going. And the ability to do that falls under the same authority to modify or outright cancel debts. In these examples and others, the law is clear. President Biden has the legal authority to cancel student debt. And doing so is not an end, but a beginning of necessary change we need to invest in higher education in a different way, so that millions more Americans are not cheated out of their futures and saddled with student debt that they can never repay.
So that is Eileen Connor. She is a lawyer at Harvard's Project on Predatory Student Lending and an absolute champion for student debtors. That is about as clear and concise of an explanation of that authority that anyone has made. And when I stopped sharing my screen, I also lost, there we go, lost a bunch of my tabs. However, if you, I know that doesn't answer all of the questions, so I'm posting a more detailed analysis of the legal authority that Luke Herron, another co-founder of the Debt Collective, wrote. So if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, have at it.
Could you also, Thomas, could you also post a link to that video? I had lots of people really interested in sharing that on social as well, and getting that out there. That was really great.
Absolutely. I have a personal goal to get more views for this video than Baby Shark, which is currently the most viewed video on YouTube. So, you know, when Eileen and Luke were first researching this legal authority about 2 years ago or so, we thought, okay, this is going to be really hard. We need everyone to know about this. Nobody knows about this. We need everyone to know about it. I am really pleased that this knowledge seems to have penetrated the population quite deeply. Not everyone knows about it yet, or not everyone believes it, maybe even Joe Biden himself, but it is true. So the law is on our side, the facts are on our side, justice is on our side, the people are on our side. We just need to defeat a few people with extraordinary power to immiserate or liberate millions of people. So one of the things that we're discussing in terms of escalation, in terms of putting pressure on, is a week of action in the end of March, like the week of March 29th to April 9th. And I'd be curious, just like a temperature check, would any of you be interested in joining actions in your local area the last week of March? You can put something in chat or thumbs up or or thumbs down,
You mean a caravan thing or something?
It doesn't necessarily need a caravan. You could do it wherever you live. But yeah, if people want to head to Washington, D.C. or to another city with a larger action, that's certainly an option.
So you're talking about us being out on the street in, social distancing, they call it.
Yeah, absolutely, in a COVID safe way. We don't want people to only be able to get rid of their student debt by dying. So yeah, socially distant, masks, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a large number of people. It could be, but it could be just a small group doing a banner drop or doing something. Congress is in their home districts that week, so it could be something at your local congressional district. After you call and write, you could show up in person and do an event for the local media.
Just to tack onto that real quick. So where I'm in Fort Wayne, Indiana, it's like 300,000 people or so, 350,000, something like that in the metro area. We had a protest after January 6th. We had 15 people show up. It was snowy, it was terrible. And we had 3 news stations show up. Because in the age of COVID, even these small actions, 10, 15, 20 people in a normal sized city, you will bring some attention. You can definitely earn media, and that's where there's so much power in building these actions and growing the base behind these actions.
Yeah, so I think, Ryan, if you wanted to open it up to a brief question period.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess right off the top, if you guys have questions, please add them to the chat or DM me and we will get them asked. I would say right off the top though, personal stories is what I think of with canceling student debt. I know specifically that between me and my wife, we're paying $500 a month, which is most of the way for a mortgage payment for most people. So like it's really prevented us from fully participating in the economy. Are there any personal stories you've heard that are like particularly devastating or insightful into the crisis itself?
Oh, every day. Our system is so broken in so many ways. But one of our members is a physician who has like upwards of $500,000 worth of student debt. And one of the things that people are saying, well, yeah, we should cancel student debt, but we shouldn't cancel it for like people who make high incomes, like doctors and lawyers. I have a hard time telling doctors and nurses after the year that they've had that they are unworthy of having their debt canceled. A lot of doctors have done something that might seem wise for their circumstances, but is probably really a bad idea. They've taken their federal student loans and converted them into private student loans at a lower interest rate. But one of the problems is that if they get sick with COVID and die, that debt doesn't die with them. Their family is still stuck with that debt. One of our members who's a physician spends his day going out with people who are houseless and testing them for COVID to make sure that they're safe and healthy. First generation college student, Black physician. When the moratorium stopped student debt payments, he's taking that $3,000 a month payment and he is paying his parents' rent to keep them from being evicted. He's paying his brother's rent to keep him from getting evicted. And so this idea that that they don't need cancellation or that there wouldn't be fallout if they had to start paying again. Like people could literally lose their housing if that happened. So, I mean, there's no shortage of horror stories. We hear multiple horror stories every day.
Right. I got a couple questions. My quick horror story is, this is so minor. I was blessed with a full ride, need-based. I had a need-based full ride. Housing and everything was covered. I was so lucky. I was the only person I know who got that. I wanted to study abroad though. So I studied abroad one summer. got $8,000 in debt. I think I've paid about 9 or 10,000 on that so far, and I still owe half of it, over half of it. So even though I don't have a lot of debt, I'm still paying constantly, and I'm still going to end up paying 2 or 3 times what I actually owed, because the need-based plans early on, and it's just brutal. And my wife's paying tons of money. Couple quick questions. Jeanette mentioned that she lives in a rural area, and I know, Thomas, you did too. I would just note that those rural areas, I think, is where you can be hyper effective, because that's when you only need 5, 10, 15 people to get your local news there, and then everybody in your town knows about it. So that can be really good. David Gordon has a great question. Kind of complicated, so follow along. Isn't the money loaned for education, doesn't it come from money that is loaned to the bank by people as deposits? So if the loan is canceled, do the bank depositors lose their money?
Short answer is no, it doesn't work that way. Most of the student loans are federal student loans that since 2010 have come directly from the federal government. It's very easy for them to cancel it. For older loans, it's a little bit more complicated. I'm not sure how much we get into the nitty gritty. Private student loans are a special case. Biden's authority does not cancel private student loans. The vast majority of student loans are federal. However, Ilhan Omar has introduced legislation in the last Congress, and I think she's going to do it again this Congress, that would cancel all student loans. And in order to cancel the private loans, the government would basically have to buy them. So those private lenders would not be left holding the bag, even though some of us might think that wouldn't be unjust. But yeah, with the federal student loans, it really isn't all that much more complicated than pressing delete in a database.
You know, when they gave cancellation rights to the mortgages, in 2008 and so on, they changed the ruling about whether or not the cancellation could be considered as income for taxation purposes, which is another element of these robbers, these murderers, what they do.
Yeah, that's a good question. And if Biden decides to cancel student debt through executive authority, the Department of Education and the IRS can also decide that it would not be a taxable event. So a lot of people have been asking, would this be counted as income? And the answer is no, it shouldn't.
You know, you have a lot of responses, you're getting more and more in the chat, and it seems as though people should be encouraged to say, well, I'd like to do something, yeah, okay. So then they could be collected by somebody who volunteers to put the activity together according to what you've been suggesting, and develop it however locally somebody's got their hand up.
Yeah, let's see, David Gordon, I'll ask to unmute. And
Oh, my question was already answered, and answered very satisfactorily too. Thank you very much. I'm going to have to sign off. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. Another question, someone DM'd me a question, so I'm not going to say their name, but this person they're in the DSA. They're wanting to tax the rich. We're doing all these other policies. If we had UBI, if we were taxing the rich, if college then was free, do we really need to cancel student debt?
I would say so, because the way that student debt is distributed is so, it hurts people, the lower income they are, the people who hold the highest student debt burden are Black women. So student debt is almost perfectly calibrated to reinforce the American caste system. People like Don Jr. get a debt-free education, and the further you are from a white man with rich parents, the more debt you are asked to take on for the crime of acting as if you are equal, of getting an education so that you can compete on an equal playing field with people like Don Jr. I would say, there's so many other angles that we can take to this, but economists who have studied this have shown that canceling student debt helps narrow the racial wealth gap, and the more debt we cancel, the more it narrows. It doesn't close the gap entirely. We need other policies that are directly addressing the racial wealth gap. And that it's good for the entire economy, right? It creates millions of new jobs, the GDP grows, something we kind of need right now. So it's good even if you've already paid off all of your student debt, even if you never had any student debt, it benefits everybody. And part of this for me is about, as someone who cares about education, is what is the purpose of an education? Is it merely Ivy-walled job training? Or is it about something else? Is it about thinking critically to engage in democracy? Is it about exploring for the sake of exploring? I just think all of us are better off if everyone can reach their full potential through education. And all of us are harmed when we force people to mortgage their future for an education.
Completely agree. Completely agree. We have a couple more questions. We got about 4 or 5 more questions, actually. So let's try to speed through these, and then we're going to get right to the action. And we're going to start contacting Biden and our representatives. This is an interesting one from Bruce. So we know that, at least my understanding is that Biden could cancel student debt via executive order. We could also cancel some student debt through reconciliation. Bruce asks, could the Treasury Secretary decide to cancel debt separate from Biden, or is that purely on Biden?
That is a good question. I am not confident of the answer. So I think that's something that maybe the economists could address. I know that the Levy Institute wrote a study where they mentioned something along those lines.
Yeah, I haven't heard anyone pushing for that. I imagine there is an angle at which you could do it, but I bet it's probably legally just more opportunities to get shut down that way. But yeah, that's a tough one. Good question. Reddy asks, where does the money that is paid to the government as student debt go? What does it go to?
Again, I feel like I'm not an economist, but the economists who have spoken to this have said that essentially when the loan is created, it's like creating new money. And when you pay it back, it's kind of like destroying that money. So the tricky part is that they can create the new money just by pressing some buttons on the computer. But in order to pay it back, we have to work. We have to spend our lives, our time, our labor in order to pay it back. That's my layperson understanding. I defer to the economist.
That's really interesting. I hadn't known that. What about fighting for, as a part of canceling student debt, fighting for free public education as well and free college? Does that have to be a part of this?
Absolutely. I'm glad that you asked that, because it's not enough to just press the reset button on a broken system. We need to fully fund public universities so that people can get an education without debt. There is legislation that has been introduced called College for All that tries to do that. But unlike canceling student debt, this really is something that has to be passed by Congress. So it's just a different route, a tougher route in some ways.
Got it. Bruce, another Bruce Jackson makes a comment that Biden was, as a senator, he played a big role in changing the bankruptcy law that exempted student loans from bankruptcy protections. He's really looking for details on that or some resources on that. We can try to find something, Bruce, once we get this action going. I'll find a resource and send it to you, but that is definitely true. We are where we are right now with student loan debt because of that bankruptcy bill that Biden championed when I was probably 4 years old. I don't know. Norma says, higher education is a segregating mechanism. Absolutely. The US system relies on division of people categorized by many ways of segregating us. That's absolutely true. And like Thomas was saying, Black women hold a majority of student or more student loan debt than other people. Okay, 1 or 2 more. Would it be better if Congress sent Biden a bill since he is refusing to take action except for the 10K? Is that an easier route?
So there's a couple of things to say about that. there is a resolution introduced in both the House and the Senate calling on Biden to use executive authority. On the other hand, Congress could just do this by passing legislation, but we have such a broken system with the filibuster, with gerrymandered seats, that it's just as difficult as it is to pass anything through Congress.
Yeah. Okay, well, if that's it for questions, you can still post some questions, but I'm going to move on to the action for now and get everyone going on that. So I'm going to post some links here in the chat to start. The first one is our script and all the contact info that you're going to need. This has everything you need on it. And I'm also going to share my screen and show you that. So that will have your options to email your reps and senators via Roots Actions email and the Debt Collective's letter to representatives. We also have a petition to President Biden to tell him to take executive action on student debt. And then we also have a script to call our reps and senators and leave voicemails, which is the best thing that we can do. So I'm going to share some of these links.